Can I welcome everyone to this evening's meeting, please? Hand over to the Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, this is the last meeting for some of you tonight. It's been a long 4 or 5 years, but at the end of the day, you are going to be missed, if not by everybody on this side, but you certainly will be by me. And those who are retiring from the council, can I wish you every success for the future. And just remember, you know, we are here at council meetings. You will be allowed to attend if you want to. And I look forward at odd times seeing some of you here. Thank you very much. Now, apologies for absence. I have Councillor Eric Carter, Ian and Veronica Fletcher, Conor Furnival, Kevin Guy, Hilda Rhodes and Nicola Lowry. Well, I know we've got prayers, but is there any other apologies? No. Now we'll go to prayers. I can never understand why they do it this way around. Keith?
Evening, everyone. Last time then this side of the elections. We better pray about that, hadn't we? Let's be quiet. Almighty God, as we gather again tonight, we're so thankful once again for all those members of our community of the borough of Telford and Wrekin who've come together tonight as councillors. We know that there's a heavy toll that such public service takes on work and family life. And so we give heartfelt thanks for the many sacrifices that all willingly make in terms of precious time spent with family and friends. And we are doubly grateful for those men and women who have given faithful service, some for so many years, freely contributing of their time, their skills, and their experiences as they strive to work for the benefit of those who live and work in our borough. We're rightly concerned with the life and times of the borough, and it's also right that our council should oppose those things which might serve to adversely impact on our community. But tonight we take this opportunity to pray for those who serve our community in the emergency services. Tonight we pray for the police officers in whom we place reliance.
Improve our school places. Finally, our Pride in Our Community capital programme for the next financial year. This will see £12 million of investment in 222 schemes for our streets and highways as part of a £50 million, the biggest single investment in roads and footpaths in Telford's history. Later in the meeting, we will discuss and take a decision on the Council's budget for the forthcoming financial year, as a result of which we expect to be the lowest council tax council in the whole of the Midlands. Our work to create a better borough is about so much more than money. Our decision in 2017 to give our officers increased enforcement powers to deal with a range of environmental crime and antisocial behaviour has now paid dividends. They are using data and intelligence from a variety of sources to identify hotspots to target for a variety of issues, from fly tipping to dog fouling, abandoned vehicles to waste management businesses. Our message is clear. Telford and Wrekin is a fantastic place to live, work and play. However, if you don't play by the rules, we're coming for you. Over the last 3 years, we've seen a big increase in the number of warning letters issued for fly tipping, the quadrupling of the number of fixed penalty notices issued, and a significant reduction in fly tipping. Mr. Speaker, we have a huge amount to be proud of, but we do have our challenges. I know that the work on tackling child sexual exploitation continues. The commissioning body, Evershed Sutherland, is now recruiting for an independent inquiry chair, and we expect them to appoint someone into that role very soon. Finally, since we met 10 days ago to refer the Future Fit Hospital configuration decision to the Health Secretary, I have twice written to the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, telling him about the formal referral. The detailed arguments and the technical papers are to follow. However, it's clear, Mr. Speaker, that we will work together as a chamber to make the case for Telford and Wrekin.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Item 6. Mr Mayor, your announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to announce I have a new scheme I have launched, a project called Building Bridges with our Elderly and Young People scheme. This will give the young children the opportunity to visit elderly residents and for the elderly residents to visit schools. I feel this is vital to encourage our elderly and future generation to engage with one another. This will strengthen relationships and build on community cohesion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 7. Public questions.
None received.
None received. Item 8, the Cabinet decisions made since the last meeting of the Council. Well, Appendix C, pages 8 and 9. Any questions over it? Oh, Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I ask my question of clarification, I would like to pay tribute to two members who I know are retiring. I wish all members who are retiring well, but two in particular. One is Councillor Adrian Meredith. He sponsored me on the Town Council 12 years ago, and some of you may wish he hadn't bothered, but he did. And I'd like to thank him for his help over the years. And then Councillor Rob Sloan, I'd like to express my appreciation for the help he's given me on Health Scrutiny Committee, which I've appreciated these 4 years. My question of clarification is in respect of Appendix C, as the Speaker said, item K, item 213, which is the CSE inquiry update, and the clarification, I guess, will be from the lead Cabinet member. We appreciate the lead Cabinet member's remarks at Cabinet recently that advisory group members' observations will be acted on, and that is appreciated. I'm going to ask the lead Cabinet member to please could he clarify one of those observations in particular. The Eversheds report to the advisory group into the structure and process of the inquiry forms part of the Cabinet papers. The Eversheds report into structure and process made reference when it talked about the publishing of the draft report by the independent chair as being subject to all elements of the terms and reference being made. Now, this was challenged as a gagging clause, since it meant that if only 0.1% of one term of reference was not met, it could block the whole draft report forever. When this was challenged, Eversheds agreed immediately that that was not the intention and that the wording would be changed to make clear that if a term of reference was only part met, the draft report could still be made public. Please can the lead Cabinet member confirm, please, that that is the situation? Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaker, I think it's worth clarifying that that is actually the member's interpretation of what's included in the Cabinet paper, or the recommendation, sorry, from Eversheds. That's not what it actually states within that paper. I think everyone should be reassured that Eversheds, Sutherland, who've got a significant track record and professional competence in terms of inquiries, are there to offer that insurance and an independent assessment that the terms of reference have been met at the end of that inquiry. I will make sure that your comments are passed on to Eversheds via the monitoring officer.
I'd like to point out to members that I did check my understanding with the officers before I asked this question. Thank you.
Thank you. Nigel?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've got a question on K 2.1.5, school admissions arrangements for 2020. Please can the Cabinet member explain how these arrangements will prevent out-of-borough children from having a higher priority than Telford and Wrekin children in getting a place at their local school?
Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Doug Moore. I'm quite surprised you actually don't know the answer. It is your government's legislation.
Short and sweet. Item 9. Item 9. 1. Cabinet. Appendix D. Is someone there? Wish to move it? Lee?
I'd like to move the recommendation contained within the report.
And seconded. Any questions? No? All those in favour? Please show. Looks unanimous. Anyone against? I'll take it. No, thank you. Service and financial planning. Item 10, Service and Financial Planning 2019-20 to 2020-21. Your Appendix E1 to 4, yellow pages. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Speaker. Members, before you, you've got the Service and Financial Planning Report 2019-20 to 2021-22. I would like to move section E1, 1 to 20, recommendation 2 in section E2, recommendation 2.1 in section E3, recommendation 2.1 in section E4, recommendation 2 in section E5. Members, this is the 8th budget report presented by the Labour administration since we assumed responsibility for the council in 2011. In each of those years, the Labour administration has run a balanced budget and received majority support for our proposals, good internal scrutiny and favourable reports from external auditors. In each of those years, this Labour administration has had to make savings and cuts forced upon it by the Conservative government. Those savings now total 117 million and will have to increase by 30 million by the time this budget strategy has run its course. The cuts from government continue unabated with a further 30% cut promised this year. That's £4.3 million, equivalent to a council tax rise of about 7%, taken away from frontline services. The government now contributes through the revenue support grant only 8 pence in every pound of our net budget. In context, we spend 60% of every pound of our net budget on adult social care and children's safeguarding alone. Yet the Conservative government's austerity agenda continues at a pace. Only 2 weeks ago, we received news from government that the discretionary housing payment grant was to be cut by a further 14%. For those who don't know, discretionary housing payment is used to support some of the most vulnerable residents in Telford and Wrekin. It assists to avoid rent arrears, evictions and potential homelessness, particularly amongst those residents who have fallen on the wrong side of the wholly unjust bedroom tax and the shambolic rollout of universal credit. It's not just what the government tells us it's taking away that causes concern, though. It's also what the government isn't currently telling us that causes the greater angst. They are unclear on the reform of local government funding beyond next year. They are unclear on what the retention of business rates model will look like, having already backtracked from 100% retention to 75% retention. They've set no clear direction on the review of new homes bonus, and they've played ignorant to any calls for them to find long-term solutions to address the national funding pressures. In adult social care, that totals 3.6 billion, children's services, 3 billion and £500 million each in public health and budgets to tackle homelessness. Even without the uncertainty around exiting the European Union, we are setting council budgets amidst the most uncertain times in our council's 20-year history. And so out of the 8 budgets we've presented, this is probably the single most important. Not necessarily because it sets out something radical or a next big idea, but because it promotes sensible, rational financial management. Continuation of a strategy that has worked so well since 2011. That it has worked so effectively is down to a number of key principles, but a huge team effort from the whole of the staff at Telford and Wrekin Council to deliver day in, day out. But the first of those principles are the huge changes to the way that the council operates and changes that continue to have been made. This includes over 1,500 less jobs, staff working for 25% less pay in real terms, senior and middle management numbers and back office cuts by over a half, and major contracts renegotiated to generate millions of pounds worth of savings, but much more in terms of improved services. Whilst that work has contributed significantly towards a savings target of 117 million, there is still more that will be required in the coming years, as I said, with over 30 million more of savings needed to be found. To that end, the strategy before members this evening confirms plans set out last year for a further 6.064 million of savings or new income to be generated. Secondly, our principle is that we firmly reject the Conservative government doctrine that the burden for making up the funding required to fund decent local services should fall entirely on the shoulders of residents through their council tax bills. This Labour administration has maintained council tax in Telford and Wrekin amongst the lowest in the Midlands and amongst the lowest of any unitary authority in the country. And despite the uncertain picture and growing cost pressures in adults and children's services, and other areas such as educational high needs block, we are still proposing that the council tax position we agreed on last year, an increase of 3.2%, remains unchanged. That's lower than 3.99% set by Shropshire, 4.49% set by Dudley, and 4.99% set in Birmingham. All revenue raised from the increase will be invested into adults and children's services. But more than that, this strategy commits a further 2.96 million for children's safeguarding and family support to protect vulnerable children. In addition, since the January Cabinet report, an additional earmark contingency of 0.847 or 847,000 has been created to fund any additional cost pressures should they arise next year. Whilst the numbers of looked after children have remained broadly stable, costs of some of the placements for children with the most complex and challenging needs now exceed £9,000 per week. These investments come on top of the £750,000 for children's safeguarding built into the budget model for 2019-20 in March 2018. That is a total additional investment of 4.893 million. There is an extra 842,000 for adult social care services, which is over and above the 770,000 built into the budget model for 2019-20 for adult social care. That's a total investment of over £6 million in adult social care and children's compared to the budget for the current year. The third principle is our commitment to investing in Telford and Wrekin, and then within the budget are details of our investment strategy. Those include 50 million for road, transport, infrastructure improvements, including over 20 million for roads and footpaths, 4.1 million for the streetlight upgrade, and 1 million for estate parking. There's 34 million to invest in schools, 28 million for the further expansion of New Place, 19 million for the Growth Fund to generate new business and jobs within the borough, and £9 million for the Newport Innovation Park. In addition to funds committed, we also commit funds to HA land deal, and I think it's worth reflecting on some of the results of the previous investments. Those include the solar farm, £200,000 per year to the council, New Place in its existing form, £1.2 million per year, growth deal, £1.5 million per year, and over 1,000 jobs created, and commercial services income that now stands at £19.4 million. It's a principle that is entirely reasonable if you reject the notion that the whole burden for paying for services must fall onto the local council taxpayer. It's also a principle which is the exact opposite to the one which we have heard put forward as an alternative in this council chamber previously, that the way to meet the savings challenge would be to retreat, sell off, outsource, or stop investing. I sincerely hope we will hear the firm rejection of that course of action by the opposition tonight, because that route is something we should all fear. I would hope amongst us, actually, that there's consensus on a pretty simple belief that we're all here and elected to represent and champion our respective wards, every resident within those wards, and collectively together we serve to champion our borough. It's a notion I've even seen pushed by the MP for Telford, for instance, although I must admit to still scratching my head at her claim to be a champion for Telford, yet vote in support of a £4.3 million cut to services that residents rely on. But let's not dwell on that. If we agree on that principle, that we are all champions for our communities, then it is only natural that we would fear any proposal put before us and that claims to be the best way to champion our borough, and that proposal to scrap capital investment programme that is designed to invest in communities we are elected to champion, or generate income to protect services by those we are elected to serve and needed by those we are elected to serve and champion. Let's make absolutely no mistake. Anyone who suggests that you should not borrow to invest in a responsible and planned way to generate improvements for our communities, to roads, to schools, to good leisure facilities, to local regeneration schemes, or to attract jobs or growth, is basically tossing away their right to ever be described as a champion for the area they are elected to represent. However, more seriously than that, anyone who pretends that sensible borrowing to generate good levels of return, to invest into frontline services, presents a danger to those frontline services and actually to the ongoing financial stability of this organisation. The only conclusion to that will be to strengthen the calls from Shropshire MPs to scrap Telford and Wrekin and merge with Shropshire. Let's be absolutely clear, not only will Labour always argue against such move with words, we will do so with actions which include support of this strategy, which provides medium and longer term financial stability to the council. And what Labour will also do, in fact, what we've always done in a constructive manner, is to deliver a borough which is a great place to live, work, learn and do business for everyone. We always focus on how we can invest, care for and protect the services our residents rely on. It's a positive, hopeful, constructive outlook. All the more remarkable given it has faced negative, downbeat, destructive opposition who have demonstrated regularly that they are even prepared to throw the reputation of this council and borough under any old bus to get any old vote. But let's just reflect on what positive looks like. Positive looks like a wholehearted, non-negotiable commitment to ensure that budget pressures will never stop us from providing the care and support that is needed to keep vulnerable children and adults safe, including those who have fallen victim to CSE or domestic violence. Positive looks like investing, not selling, our fantastic leisure facilities. As we've heard, they now provide free swimming for under 16s, and we teach over 3,000 children per week to swim in those facilities. Positive looks like investing in our green spaces, creating and protecting more than any other previous administration and investing more than £4 million into the town park, one of the top parks anywhere, wherever you go. Positive looks like investing in tourism to bring in 250 million a year to the local economy, and Telford at 50, where over 100,000 people visited events to celebrate our 50 year, and millions have been invested in community facilities, events and legacies which will see out the next 50 years. Positive looks like millions of pounds of investment over and above government grants to ensure that 98% of homes and businesses now enjoy access to high-speed broadband. Positive looks like investing in bringing jobs and growth into the borough, creating £1.5 million a year for the council services and creating over 1,000 jobs. Positive has been securing the single biggest foreign inward investment in the UK at T54. Positive also looks like investing in secure jobs, including investments at Audley Avenue Business Park. Positive has been investing over £5 million into upgrading our streetlights. Positive has been investing 34 million, or proposals to invest 34 million into expanding our schools, on top of the 200 million already invested, so that every child in this borough has access to the wonderful education facilities that are the envy of so many. Positive has been investing over 50 million into roads and footpaths and other pride programmes across every community. Positive has been investing so that more and more people with learning disabilities can move into or live in their own home. Positive has been about investing into Southwater to create 400 jobs and generate profit to invest into the council services, rather than the millions that would have been wasted in debt payments under the Tories' plans for their own town centre headquarters. Positive has been investment in every high street so that they can overcome the national challenges that they face. And on top of this, an absolute commitment to maintain existing free parking across our borough towns. Positive has been tackling the housing crisis by building nearly 300 new place rental homes, offering stability and a forever home to hundreds of families. Positive has been setting out plans to extend New Place, to build bungalows, adapted accommodation, step down from hospital accommodation, key worker accommodation and care accommodation. Positive has been investing in our solar farm to generate clean, green energy and generate money for council frontline services and to invest in state-of-the-art recycling centres. Positive has been investing in partnerships to protect every library, children's centre and community centre and recruiting over 1,200 volunteers for council-run programmes. Positive has been investing in, caring for and protecting this great borough we call home and its residents we call neighbours, family, friends and colleagues. Positive, positive, Labour, positive. And how bad you must feel as a councillor if you've been against almost every single thing in that list. I've always believed that it's always the right time to do the right thing. Tonight, members, do the right thing. Vote to support this strategy. I move.
Thank you, Lee. Councillor Sean Davies will second the proposal.
I second it and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Eade. Adrian Lawrence, is it? I wish you two would make your mind up. No, you came over and muttered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. Thanks for giving me the opportunity of speaking for the opposition. I want to focus this evening on the 117 million savings which you talk so much about. I don't want anyone to feel that anything I say this evening is in any way a criticism of officers. We've been through a difficult situation. The national crisis caused by Gordon Brown and your legacy government left the whole country in a parlous mess. Absolutely the case. Our national government has prioritised the right things, the NHS and education, and it has made the situation difficult for local authorities like ourselves. But I want to say that the 117 million figure that you so often quote, this evening you've played a straight bat and described it as savings, which it is categorised as by officers. But over these last years, time and time again, your members have misinformed and confused residents by combining the words 117 million cuts with savings. These items are items which are being categorised as by officers as savings, and I understand that they follow national guidance and the guidance of your administration. But so let's have a look, members, at the reality of the budget. In 2009-10, the first year which your 117 million of savings compares to, the gross budget was 400,985,000, and today, after you approve, if this budget goes through, the gross budget will be 428,202,000, an increase in the gross budget of 27,220,000. If you look at our net budget, in 2009-10 it was 121,687,000, and 2018-19 121,067,000. So hardly any change in reduction, a reduction of 620,000. Of course, in inflationary terms, that is a reduction because the time value of money means that the size of the budget then was worth, a different amount to now. And there have been many changes in between the gross and net budgets. Specific grants have turned into RSG of 40 million. There's been inflation, pension, and other contribution changes, and net investment pressures, including adult social care, etc. This organisation is quite different from what it was 9 years ago, and I pay tribute to officers who've done their very best to reorganise the authority in a way as to protect services, and we welcome the investment that's gone into adult social care, looked after children, and the highways. I know we've disagreed on social media about that, but in our previous budget, we also invested plan to invest in highways. Members, I've taken a look at I've asked officers to take a look and give me an analysis of what's in that 117 million, and I can pull out some of the items which I think demonstrates that 117 million is misleading to residents. That 117 million, for example, includes the MRP. If you remember, that was your former colleague, Councillor Clements, found a way, following other local authorities, to account in a different way for the interest on long-term loans. So for me, that is no change whatsoever in the repayments on the loan, interest or whatsoever, yet you've classified that as a saving. You've called it a cut as well. We've increased, we've had growth in the new homes bonus and council tax of 3.6 million, and business rates have grown by 2.28 million, and you've put up leisure charges by 14.45 million. You've made savings on procurement of 12.55 million, and you've redesigned services of 30 million and made staffing reductions of 31 million. But residents won't see a lot of those as the savings or cuts, as you often call them. They're nothing like that. There are some welcome things in what you've done. The investment, as I've said, but it's nothing at all in the way you portray it to be. It's a difficult national situation, very tough, and officers have done their best, and there are some good things, no doubt, about what you're saying. If we're fortunate to form the administration, then we commit to doing a 100-day budget where we'll come up with our priorities and communicate those to residents. That's all they need from me tonight. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bill Tomlinson.
Well, Mr. Speaker, spoken like an accountant, if nothing else. It was interesting that he casually overlooked the fact that how much of the revenue support grant we've actually had deducted and how we've had to try and work with. He never mentioned that at all. He mentioned that the government needed to make savings, which they did, but he never mentioned that that over 100 million has been cut from this local authority. Not a single thing. It's a disgrace. It's also a disgrace that they can come forward and represent the opposition. They don't represent the opposition. They represent the Conservative Party. We're part of that opposition and we're not represented by them at all. And never will be. He comes up and says that he's going to do a 100-day budget, but he can't afford to take the time to actually give us the most pertinent points that he would put forward to allow the electors to make a decision on the differences between everybody else. Not one. In 2 years, not one. Not one single fundamental change as he recommended here tonight. We're living in times of awful austerity up and down the country. I won't go into too much detail because of the motion coming forward later on. We're having to increase council tax to people who can ill afford it. We're trying to keep our council taxes as low as we can. The only statutory protection people get now is when they retire and if they're on low incomes. If they're not on that, we can barely afford to help support them anymore. So they're struggling away, trying to make every penny count. We've had to stealthily pass things down to some of the town and parish councils to fund because we couldn't have funded it ourselves. It's a case of trying to make do and mend. We're threatened in a year or so's time with the fact we don't know what revenue support grant, if any, we're going to be getting. It's all up in the air. We can plan for next year, but nothing after that. What responsible government up and down the country, wherever their political party or wherever they are, and particularly a party that allegedly is going to be here for another 4 years in government, would leave you in a situation where you're looking in a year's time and you don't know what the funding formulas are going to be. Wouldn't it be sensible to do those now so that we could plan, at least know what the pain or suffering that we could go through? Because it is pain and suffering for a lot of people. It's talked about the increase in crime, and that's coming up later on, but people forget that local authorities are an agency that partner up with the police, they partner up with fire, they partner up with the NHS. But they can only partner up if they've got the funds to partner up with. We're lacking possibly in the support we would like to give the health service with a more rounded care on adult social services and children's social services. It has to be joined up. We would probably like to provide more preventative things for young people to be involved with, to try and mitigate knife crime by engaging more with local youth and local communities. And this isn't just in Telford and Wrekin, this is up and down the country. It's well known that if you engage with young people and can get them positively doing other things, you don't necessarily get the levels of crime that we are suffering now. Cuts, cuts, cuts. Some are savings, and I would say that this local authorities made heroic efforts of other local authorities up and down the country to rationalise, and they have done that. There was waste before, and sometimes when emergencies are put in front of us, it's when those moments come that you really have to look at the nitty-gritty and get it sorted out. And I also pay tribute to the officers and the lead members here who've put these plans together, who've managed to cut out as much waste as they can. But there comes a time where there's virtually nothing left to cut out that's waste. It's only cutting away at the very fabric of what we use as a local authority to support the community that we were elected primarily to look after. We're elected by people, particularly to look after the most vulnerable in our society. And we can only do that with the funds and money available to us. I don't support necessarily every dot and I and cross and T in that, but 95% of this budget I support. I even support its bold moves to invest in industry within our own borough, even though some of those investments, shall we say, aren't the most choice ones. I won't mention toilet roll factories, but well, I have now, but there you go. But it can lead local authorities, when they haven't got sufficient funds, and when they're trying to be adventurous and they're trying to get the best value for money, it can lead to mistakes happening. They can overlook the very communities they're trying to support because they're anxious. They're anxious to try and make this money, to put the money in the coffers, to really pay out on those areas where they really need that money paying out, and adult and children's social services. You can understand the odd mistake where the odd development put through and where money is put in more important than people. Thankfully, there are checks and balances out there, and these things can be prevented. But overall, I support this budget. Reluctantly with a council tax increase, which some can ill afford. But given the pile of state that we're faced, and given the performance against other local authorities, which we'll match if not doing better, then I reckon I also support this budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Bill. Members, I've got two other councillors who've indicated they wish to speak. Can I draw those councillors' attention to the fact that they will have 3 minutes each? And the first one is Councillor Kuldip Sahota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I start, can I just say that any boos from the blue corners will be welcomed while I'm making my speech. Mr. Speaker, like it has already been said, since 2011, this Labour administration has faced unprecedented Tory government grant cuts. Every year since 2011, it has been a real challenge for all of us to do a budget at the same time to keep delivering a good services to our citizens, in particular to the young, the elderly and the vulnerable members of our society. It has been said, and here comes that £117 million there, Councillor. It has been said that £117 million government grant cuts in the last 8 years. That's all in the papers there, Councillor, but that's your interpretation of it. In spite of all these cuts, this Labour administration, yes, the Labour administration, have always provided first-class services to our citizens. Not only do we provide first-class services, but we are also a very innovative council when faced with the government cuts. And I'm just going to give you just a few examples. Just look at some of the examples for the last 8 years since we've been in power. And just a couple of examples. One of them, building new homes to get more revenue in on our council-owned Brown site. and we have already done quite a few, and we are ongoing with it. Secondly, solar farm. We installed that on the council-owned land and bringing in more. And then, of course, the South Water development, the jewel in our crown, creating in our borough, creating hundreds of jobs. Not only are we an innovative council, Mr. Speaker, but we also fight our constituents' fights as well. Remember MOD, everyone? Yes, back in 2010, when the Tory government had a plan to cut down, to close down the MOD. And my mate, Bill McClemens, and I, we went to Bristol. And it's a long story. I'm not going to go through it all. But as they say, the rest is all history. And we all know what happened. Not only did we not save the closure of a MOD, Donington site, but we also brought in hundreds of jobs. Talking about the fights, Mr. Speaker, what about our local hospital? Only under the Tories these things happen. Mr. Speaker, I will vote for this budget, and I look forward to 4 more years of this Labour administration after June the 2nd. Thank you.
Why did it being put back? Brexit. Quiet. Quiet. Shirley Reynolds. I've got her down.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again this year, the budget process has been very difficult. We've had to make cuts because of the continued savage reduction in funding by this cruel Tory government. I am very proud of this administration. We've used Invest to Save to ensure income for our borough and our residents, to ensure that vital services can continue in spite of the savage 117 million, we'll mention it again, cuts to our budget. Unlike some of our neighbours, this has not deterred our administration from protecting services and investing in the future of the borough and its residents. We will continue to support those in need in our borough, and as the lead member for education and employment, I am appalled that 8,335 young people in our borough, aged between 0 and 15, live in income-deprived households. My administration will continue the support for the food bank. That is vital, as is the additional funding available for children's safeguarding and adult social care. Our children's education is paramount, and our £31 million investment in schools confirms that as Telford continues to be a great place to live, work and raise families, my administration is ensuring that schools have sufficient capacity for our young people. We are anticipating the growth and investing strategically where demand is greatest across our schools. We will continue to ensure businesses invest in our town. South Water alone has generated over 400 jobs. New Place continues to provide over 300 quality homes for hard-working families, whilst also generating a profit. It's also shocking that 62% of all the homelessness acceptances in our borough are from families with dependent children. Our investment strategy is reaping rewards, the solar farm alone contributing £200,000 profit towards protecting adult care services. Whilst the opposition are fixated with selling off assets that are bringing in an income for our town, that clearly is not the way to go. What will happen next year and the year after? This government keeps telling us there are further cuts to come, even if austerity is supposed to be over, just nobody is saying when. Tell me what's the logic in selling them off. I am proud we're investing to create jobs and generate income. I call upon members across the floor, lobby your MPs, get a fairer funding deal for Telford from your government. Our MPs should be fighting to get more money for Telford. We're asking for a fair deal for all our families. I'm proud to belong to a compassionate party who wants to protect the most vulnerable in society. We're an administration who will fight for fairer funding for Telford. We're committed to serving this community who elected us to the best of our ability. This is a budget that shows that it's a budget that cares about the people of Telford, and I fully endorse it.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to Culdip. That ex-Margaret Thatcher supporting councillor, of course. He did let slip on Radio Shropshire. He voted for Margaret Thatcher, and I'm sorry you've changed, really, Culdip. Very quickly, about some of the commitments in the budget, certainly around social care and safeguarding. That's something that we've always supported. In fact, some of our alternative budgets, certainly one, propose putting additional money into that, which you indeed changed your budget proposals and followed our lead, as you followed our lead on a number of instances. I do want to follow on from what Adrian was saying about the cuts, the £117 million cuts. That's what you're calling them. Let's have a look at those, shall we, and see how that 117 million is actually made up. The figure firstly includes 6 million of additional income by way of extra business rates and council tax. It also includes 14.5 million of further additional income from increasing council charges, rentals, property investment portfolio, plus interestingly additional grant from the current government via the new homes bonus. That's hardly a cut. This intriguing figure seems to get more and more interesting as a further figure of 21 million is provided by non-staffing efficiencies, perhaps the very thing we should have been doing anyway. Plus, as Adrian mentioned, the smoke and mirrors changes to accountancy rules, which alter the way in which we repay debt via a minimum revenue provision. In fact, the Director of Finance at that time wouldn't let our administration do it. This, of course, backloads payments and puts extra strain on the revenue budget in later years. 12.5 million of this 117 million is actually through savings on what and how and where we buy goods for the council. Again, something this council should have been doing anyway, but has been forced into. The way we provide services has also saved another 30.5 million of the overall total. And the fact that we're doing it with nearly 1,600 staff less adds another £31 million in savings. Little wonder that members of the community had little sympathy with the huge and inefficient way that local authorities, including this one, spent their hard-earned money. In fact, in the whole long history of this council, only once has there been a voluntary challenge to reduce this council's spending levels. And we did it to run the council responsibly. You did it because you were forced into doing it. Now, in previous alternative budgets, we've rightly challenged the administration about debt and borrowing and realising capital assets. We're an opposition group, and that's what we should do, due to the risks involved. We have continually asked for a profit and loss account to be produced for the solar farm to verify claims that it is making a profit, and that's gone on for some time. At last, that's finally been provided, and the profit of around 200k per annum confirmed. The same applies to New Place, which also shows a profit. That being so, a future Conservative administration would retain and use to maximum advantage any such asset to help balance the council's revenue budget. However, we need to regain control of borrowing and debt, which under 8 years of Labour control has quadrupled. In 2011, borrowing of this authority stood at 93.7 million. It will soon stand at a whopping 365 million. This with a debt is a massive exposure that an incoming Conservative administration will immediately review with an emergency 100-day budget. Let me also say we'll put an end to the wasteful junkets and gala dinners that have cost taxpayers £5,000 and who, of course, could actually forget the £9,000 on the laser show, if you actually got round to seeing it, that is.
I can ask them whether they want to turn around and comply with what I'm saying is a different thing. If the Speaker at the rostrum, whoever he is or they are, makes a controversial claim, then they have the right to voice their objection to it. Now, it's not a personal thing with anybody, it's purely and simply that. So we'll let it go, shall we? Now, service financial arrangements, we need to
We've got some more speakers.
vote on, but before that, I've got two more speakers. Three. Rob Sloan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to make a couple of points. I'm interested in Councillor Lawrence's assessment of budgetary making. Presumably, he went to a night school with Chris Grayling. The first point I wanted to make is the point I made at scrutiny regarding, and it is a cut. It's a cut in the grant to public health of £300,000. That is a cut in anybody's terms. In 2013, the government delegated to local authorities the responsibility for public health, and I support that as a way forward, and indeed I support Matt Hancock's fine words last year about prevention rather than cure. But if we're to improve the health of our residents, then this or any other government really needs to put its money where its policy mouth is. The second point I want to make is about the ongoing need to reduce the Council's dependency on government grants. As chair of the Audit Committee in the last few years, it's my job to sign off the accounts, having listened to the councillors who sit with me and to listen to the opinions of the external auditors. I was pleased to hear the Council's external auditors tell us they've used New Place and the solar farm as exemplars to other councils up and down the country, and how to do investments, not because they're just beneficial financially to the borough, but because they improve the fabric of the borough, and more importantly, they're in the borough. And I'd be rather investing, Speaker, in places like New Place than investing in the high street, as a council down the road are doing at the moment, what I would suggest is a risky strategy. Finally, later in the agenda, I'll be supporting the motion standing in the name of Bill Tomlinson. But in reality, Council, the Rubicon has been crossed in local government finance, and we really do have to stand on our own 2 feet. Finally, Mr. Speaker, this undoubtedly will be my last contribution to full council. And if I'd got any doubt about this, I think Councillor Nelson has finished my career once and for all tonight. But I do thank everybody I've worked with over the many years. And I will be back for the odd meeting. Though, to be fair, Mr. Speaker, I've been to some odd meetings in my time on the council. Thank you.
Nigel Dugmore.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Speaker, I have a few points that require explaining, but first I'd like to thank the officers for all their hard work under this administration. You have my sympathy. With council debt quadrupled to £365 million, it must keep them all fully occupied. We hear a lot of pseudo-indignation at the lack of government funding for this council. Yet when we strip away the political waffle and analyse the figures carefully, we see how this administration is trying to mislead the public regarding these spending cuts. As we have heard from my colleagues, council loan repayments are being changed so that the council pays less now and more in future years. That's not a cut. These reduced payments are now being presented as a spending cut. Ingenious or disingenuous? You decide. An explanation would be good. Therefore, the often quoted £117 million spending cut is inaccurate. Other reported cuts are based on a reduction in estimated income, money we never had in the first place. The only certainty is that the reported spending cuts are less than have been reported. This whole report is built on sand. Mr. Speaker, all councils have been put under financial pressure, paying down the debts built up in the last Labour government, compounded by their lack of control of the banking industry. So at times like this, the council needs to spend money, what money is available, wisely. Sadly, that's not the case here. The last 2 years of usable council tax increase have not been spent on protecting services for the vulnerable and the elderly in our society, but on events for the so-called Telford 50 celebration. Austerity for the many, parties for the few. Absolutely disgraceful. Mr. Speaker, we have heard tonight about the many millions that have been spent on encouraging businesses and jobs to the borough, and some of it has paid off. However, unemployment in Telford and Wrekin is rising, bucking the national trend. So I suggest that the investment strategy is changed. And as we have seen previously, Labour isn't working. Hopefully that change in strategy will come in a couple of months' time. An explanation of the anomalies would be good.
Councillor Angela McClements.
Well, wow. No opposition budget, a third of you missing, and I think we ought to, that speech from Councillor Lawrence ought to go viral, you know, put it against Councillor Carter's, and they want to take control of this council. Anyway, well, with everything going on with this shambolic government, we need to remind ourselves that this government has inflicted the most vicious cuts to local government services in modern history since they came to power in 2010. We need to remind ourselves that local government is still in crisis and this government continue to push the blame onto councils. We need to remind ourselves that councils were the first target when the Tories came into power, losing 60p out of every pound that the last Labour government was spending on local government. Unfortunately, this seems to be the norm, accepted, as we see even Tory councils collapse into bankruptcy, with more likely to follow, with the services that people rely on having been cut to the bone. It must never be the norm. It must never, ever be accepted. Now, we all know the pressures of our NHS. We all feel them here across our borough. Yet this government decision to cut the public health budget is so incredibly short-sighted and will undermine our ability to improve our residents' health and keep pressure off the NHS and social care. Yet our prevention services have been cut to the bone at a time when they are most needed. I look at what this Labour government has achieved since taking back power in 2011, and I'm proud of our achievements, proud of that we've been able to invest, care for and protect services for our residents. I'm proud that other councils across the country, you know, come to Telford and Wrekin asking for our advice and support. And when you get the council's external auditors using Telford and Wrekin as an example to other councils across the country on how best to borrow to invest on initiatives such as New Place and the solar farm, then you know we are seen as an exemplary model to follow, and yet still with the lowest council tax in the Midlands. We all know in this chamber that there are tough times ahead for local government, yet like Councillor Carter, I found it beyond belief that the Telford MP voted in support of a 4.3 million cuts to services for our residents. And I understand that my own MP for the Wrekin couldn't even be bothered to be there to vote. Now that is shocking. Mr. Speaker, I wholeheartedly support this budget, and in closing would like to pay tribute to Ken Clark, the finance team and Councillor Carter again for the work that they have put in ensuring that we have a robust budget which gives financial stability for the future of our borough. And let's not forget the employees at Telford and Wrekin for the fantastic work they do in, day out, against a backdrop of financial constraints and reduced people support. Thank you.
Councillor Carter. Oh, sorry, Sean. When you reserve your right, I always think he's not going to get up.
Mr. Speaker, I'll keep it brief. How dare the Conservatives sit over there and praise council staff, but then shrug their shoulders about cutting 1,500 jobs? How dare the Conservatives over there say that they're going to sell off New Place because they don't understand it? How dare they offend and scare those families who live in New Place houses? How dare the Conservatives over there, Mr. Speaker, say it's an easy thing to do by putting a budget together when the last 2 years they haven't bothered to do so? How dare the Conservatives over there talk about Telford at 50 funding when they turn up for the photographs and they say they're going to vote against and then criticise the funding. How dare the Leader of the Opposition talk about staff going on an award ceremony when he was the Leader of the Council, he had a government procurement card and he had jollies in Europe. How dare, Mr Speaker, how dare, Mr Speaker, yes, I've got the FOI, Andrew Eve, how dare the Leader of the Opposition talk about pain when he's taken every penny of his allowance while cabinet members over here have forgone money to help young people in his home ward. How dare the Leader of the Conservatives talk about local government when they don't believe in local government? How dare the people over there deny the cuts that this government is doing? Tell that to the homeless people in this town. Tell that to the old people in my ward waiting for a stair lift. Tell that to the people accessing food banks. How dare they? How dare they, Mr Speaker? Because they are cut deniers. And I tell you something, Mr Speaker. I'll tell you something, Mr Speaker. At the local government association, Conservative-led, every single Conservative leader of a council, Labour leader of a council, every Conservative organisation that I talk to, they don't deny the cuts, Mr Speaker. They don't take their residents for fools. What they do, they stand up for local government funding rather than being scabs like the members opposite who decide that they're going to mislead residents by denying the scale of the cuts. How dare they? Mr Speaker, nobody in this borough is stupid enough to believe the misleading, pathetic statements that have come from the Conservatives today. They know what's happening, and how dare the Conservatives believe that they can mislead the residents of Telford and Wrekin. They should hang their heads in shame.
Would you, would you like to be quiet?
Yes, thank you. I've never broken a strike. It's the wrong word to use.
Well,
that's going to be the worst speech I think I've ever heard. 40 years in manufacturing, I've never broken a strike. It's the wrong word to use about us.
well, I'm sorry. It was said, don't argue with me. I've told you before. And you. Right. Carter, Councillor Carter, to reply.
I don't know where you go from there really, because I'm pretty angry. You've had 11, it's all right sitting smugly there, you've had 11 and a half minutes speaking today and you've not had one good positive thing to say about Telford and Wrekin, the town that I've grown up in, that I've learnt in, that I've worked in, and nothing about this organisation either. The other thing that makes me angry is that you praise staff on one hand but then criticise expenditure to take them to award ceremonies where their achievements are recognised nationally as good and excellent. I'm also angry, it's my turn to speak, I'm also angry that you deny £117 million worth of savings, that you deny government cuts. The next thing you'll be doing is denying that Lucy Allen voted in favour of taking £4.3 million away from us. You'll be denying that we need to spend, or we've had to spend £2.2 million with the Citizens Advice Bureau and £150,000 with the Telford Food Bank for our public to be able to deal with the impacts of austerity. That makes me really, really mad. And for 4 years, we've basically seen your performance. We've witnessed it at first hand. You either deny reality, distort reality, or you just make stuff up, don't you? You just make stuff up, and you've done that tonight as well. You're denying that there's been cuts. The Conservative chair of the LGA say that the cuts have gone too far. Conservative leaders from councils across the country have said that cuts have happened and have gone too far. The Conservative leader next door in Shropshire says cuts are causing havoc. Yet you are in denial. And then you distort reality and again you make stuff up. Only a couple of weeks ago at a council meeting, we had the Leader of the Opposition saying that he actually thought the authority had done well, considering it's on video. It's on video. So you're denying it? We've changed your story, so you've distorted reality tonight then, haven't you? We've also, however, this is the contradiction that they bring forward. We also have the Leader of the Opposition basically saying he, for one, is pleased that the government grant is going. He actually endorses taking away millions from frontline services that people in this borough remain. Now, we've heard a bit about a 100-day budget. Basically, you've had 364 days to produce an alternative budget, yet you can't be bothered to do that tonight. Okay, well, just on that one, Councillor Reid, you've made a lot of claims about the past tonight. Maybe we should have a debate one day about what has gone on over the last 10 or 20 years and individual councillors' actions over that period. Maybe we should do that, because your memory seems very good. You've not even bothered to come up with even a few words, a few woolly commitments about what you would do in terms of an alternative. So the only thing that we can do is remind ourselves about the last thing that you put down in black and white. And let's remember what that said. It said that staff budgets would be cut with words like, we favour a smaller central structure. So I'm telling you, if you work for Telford and Wrekin in payroll, finance, treasury management, highways, architects, HR, they'll be cut. You'll reduce them. We've got departments that we've held on to a council in order for us to be able to explore and capitalise on commercial ventures. They'll be gone. They'll be cut. You'll cancel a growth fund, jobs, income into the council. You will sell off New Place. You've confirmed that tonight. You will cancel the Pride projects. In your last budget, you proposed closing 2 libraries. You use coded language about future public ownership of our leisure centres. You're hiding your natural instinct to sell, sell, sell. And in terms of Pride funding, let's think about that you would cut. That's what you said in your last alternative budget. You would cut that. That funding pays for environmental maintenance schemes, the small things that matter most to residents. It improves local parks, communal areas, play parks, creates extra spaces for parking, safer routes to school, the list goes on. Funding for highways and footpaths. Funding for highways and footpaths will be cut. And these last 2, highways and Pride, are interesting because they also reveal a further aspect of you. Hypocrisy. I've seen many pictures of you, and it's okay smiling because I noticed the member for Madeley who stands at who took his picture at the Madeley Sports Centre, £1.7 million worth of investment, that your alternative budget proposed scrapping, actually. But I've seen pictures of many councillors and read many people already promoting their candidature for local elections, claiming credit for these improvements to their areas, whether that be events, road improvements, and that's fine. But when it comes from councillors who have actively voted against Pride funding and whose last written down stated position was to scrap or reduce the funding or promote, which you haven't really done tonight, but I think you will, promote a financial plan that would endanger the future funding for these things, then there is no other word than hypocrisy. You deny reality, you distort reality, you make stuff up, you are hypocrites. The critical eye of the electorate is coming, where our proposals, our credentials, our values are under the microscope. But what that critical eye will reveal, and what it will suss out, is those who deny or distort reality and make stuff up, or who are being hypocritical. That critical eye will, if you're a councillor in a ward, as there are a few of you over there, whose ward is suffering from the housing crisis, and New Place can help resolve that, that if you fail to support this budget tonight, the critical eye of the electorate will suss that out. If you're a councillor in a ward where extra parking spaces, a regenerated high street, serious investments in Pride initiatives are going to benefit your residents, as there are a few of you there, if you fail to support this budget tonight, the critical eye of the electorate, it will clock you. If you're a councillor for a ward where a safer route to school or some extra school places will bring benefit to you and young people in your ward, and if you fail to support this budget tonight, that critical eye, make no mistake, will find you out, and it will be pointed out. To the rest of the sensible councillors, let's just for once embrace the positive and the constructive. I've got no more to say. I move the recommendations. Please support this budget.
Thank you, Lee.
Okay, so we're now moving to the vote. So we're going to take...
Yeah. Right, members.
Take E1 to E4 on block.
We're going to take the vote on the recommendations. However, one I have split off to be taken purely and simply on its own. So you will take E1 to E4, and then we will deal with E5, the council tax setting one, as a recorded vote. You all clear? Well, if you're not clear, Stephen, you are quite willing to go. Now, if you'd like to go, go.
Are you ejecting me?
I don't eject you. I will order you.
That's a very, very strong word, Malcolm.
Yeah, it's very... I'm... Councillor Smith.
Ordering me for what reason?
Because of your continual interjection, and I wish you would carry on talking with your hands as against with your mouth. Right? You see, you don't even know you're saying it. No.
I have talked with my hand in the past.
Yeah. So have I.
We're taking
Right.
E1 to E4 on block. All those in favour?
All those on recommendations to E4.
E1 to E4.
E1 to E4. All those in favour? Right. Those against? Oh, they have got arms. Any abstentions? No, the motion is passed. Now we now move on to E5, the council tax. And I wish to take this as a recorded vote. Would you please show, because I can do it? Okay. All those in favour of the recommendation, as your name is called, speak.
Councillor Bentley.
Again.
Councillor Blundell. Councillor Boylan. Councillor Burford. Councillor Burrell. Councillor Lee Carter. Councillor Clare. Councillor Cook. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dugmore. Councillor Reid. Councillor Arnold England. Councillor Nathan England. Councillor Evans. Councillor Francis. Councillor Greenaway. Councillor Hoskin. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keenan. Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Loveridge. Councillor Mason. Councillor McClements. Councillor Mehta. Councillor Meredith. Councillor Moyner. Councillor Murray. Councillor Nelson. Councillor Overton. Councillor Pinter. Councillor Gilly Reynolds. Councillor Shirley Reynolds. Councillor Steve Reynolds. Councillor Sahota. Councillor Scott. Councillor Seymour. Councillor Sloan. Councillor Charles Smith. Councillor Malcolm Smith. Councillor Tillotson. Councillor Karen Tomlinson. Councillor Bill Tomlinson. Councillor Turley. Councillor Watling. Councillor Wright.
The motion is carried.
Questions?
Right. Next item on your agenda is any questions. Have all members got the sheet? All members have got a sheet of questions to be asked. Can I ask the relevant councillor, when they stand, that they read the question out? First question, Mark Boland. Boylan?
Can the Leader of the Council tell me how many young people the Leader and Cabinet Members' bursary scheme has helped?
Thank you, Mark. Following the successful opening of the grant scheme in April 2018, we've now awarded nearly £33,000 to a total of 124 children and young people, and at least one young person in every postcode area in Telford and Wrekin has benefited. I can confirm that In your ward, 6 individuals have benefited from the fund.
Thank you, Sean. Is there any supplementary to that? No. All right, thank you. Question number 2, Councillor Angela McClement will ask the following question of Councillor Ray Evans.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On the 20th of September 2018, this Council unanimously supported a motion calling on the Minister for Housing, Communities and Local Government to extend the disqualification criteria for public office to include anyone who holds public office who in the past, present or future who admit or have been convicted of domestic abuse to be barred from holding public office. As at the 16th of January 2019, we hadn't had a response or even acknowledgement back from the Minister. Could the Cabinet Member for People Services, Visitor Economy and Partnerships confirm whether she has since had a response?
Thank you, Councillor McCants, for raising this matter again. On the basis of the motion, on the 6th of November 2018, I wrote to the Right Honourable James Brokenshire on behalf of the Council, Telford and Wrekin, calling on the Government to recognise the parity of domestic abuse alongside sexual offences and antisocial behaviour, and asking them to expand this disqualification criteria policy accordingly. I received no answer. I wrote again on the 22nd of January 2019, this time sending both a letter and an email to James Brokenshire, asking for a response and enclosing a further copy of my original letter. Council, I am saddened, if not surprised, to have to inform you that in spite of this government's professed commitment to preventing domestic abuse, the Minister has still not found time on this matter of sufficient importance to respond or even acknowledge my letters. Perhaps if I put Brexit in the title, I might have had more success. However, can I take this opportunity to reassure Council that this Labour administration is doing more than paying lip service to addressing this significant issue. Since the adoption of our domestic abuse strategy in January, we have started an in-depth review of need and demand, which will inform our services and support the development of our future offer. Discussions with Citizens Advice on a programme to identify signs of abuse in clients have begun. Freedom Programme training has been funded for April, and we are piloting the Young Person's Crush programme with the West Mercia Women's Aid. We are also actively making the links to serious violence, county lines and criminal exploitation agenda, and also with the drug and alcohol agenda, considering how vulnerabilities and risks multiply the issue. Finally, Council, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate this administration on showing its positive ongoing commitment by allocating a further £50,000 for this vital work for the Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any supplementaries?
Yes, Mr Speaker.
Right,
thank you. Thank you, Councillor Evans, for your response. And I'm really pleased with the progress that the Council is making on this important issue of domestic abuse. But quite frankly, I'm appalled that we've not even had the courtesy of an acknowledgement to our letter. It was the 20th of September when this Council supported the motion. I last asked on the 16th of January, and we still hadn't had a response. And now we're at the end of February, and still nothing. We're a white ribbon town. We do take the issue of domestic abuse seriously in our borough. And I therefore wonder if, Councillor Evans, if you could again follow this up with the Minister and also contact both our MPs for Telford and the Wrekin and request that they ask him to look urgently and respond. Although I have to say the MP for the Wrekin also has an abysmal record of not responding back to constituents, but you can but try. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McClements. I certainly will do that.
Question 3. Councillor Peter Scott.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This is to Councillor John Minor. Given the stark warnings on climate change and the potential loss of insect life in the future, what measures are the Council taking now and in the future to combat these issues? And is there a policy on the planting of trees and insect attractors?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Scott. The Council recognises that climate change is one of the most challenging issues affecting our environment today. The Met Office is forecasting that temperatures for each of the next 5 years are likely to be 1% or more above pre-industrial levels. And with Britain's greenhouse gas emissions are 40% lower than in 1990, huge challenges remain to reduce emissions. Policies in our local plan are designed to ensure that new development is designed for energy efficiency by promoting sustainable building standards and the generation of renewable and low-carbon energy. In 2014, the council's solar farm at Wheatshows began generating electricity. The farm forms part of the council's strategy and becomes more environmentally and financially sustainable while reducing its carbon footprint, raising £200,000 in revenue. Of the consequences attributed to climate change is a dramatic decline in our insect species. More than 40% of insect species are declining and a third are endangered. Policies to our local plan are designed to ensure that new development will result in net gains for wildlife and habitats across the borough. Telford's green spaces form a network of wildlife corridors, stepping stones that allow insect species to move through the borough. Grassland areas such as Lodgefield, Muxton Marsh and 15 local nature reserves, 200 green guarantee areas, Rough Park, Ramble are all known to support a diversity of insect species. In addition, roadside verges, including those along the Ketley Brook and the Rockwood Ironwood Way, form linear wildflower corridors for many of our pollinating species. Recently, Telford Town Park Centre has been supporting local beekeepers by hosting training sessions, and this year the park will host its own beehives, with 2 hives in place by mid-April. In December last year, DEFRA produced the latest information and implementation plan for its national pollinating strategy. The Council is now reviewing this particular plan and its recommendations. The Council is also ready to start a 10-year grounds and cleaning contract from the 1st of April with the IVRD. A major element of the contract is added value and community engagement. This includes working with parishes, friends of groups, volunteers and schools. An annual plan will include aspects such as tree planting, wildflower schemes and a host of other local community schemes which will enhance suitable habitats. Our Environmental Officer, Mark Latham, is attending APSI, the benchmarking local government agency, who now have a global warming benchmarking process, and I will ask the officer himself to forward you any information that's relevant, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the reply. And yes, if I can have a copy of that as well in writing, that'll be helpful. No further question. Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, could we consider the sale of H13, the site in Newport known as the Horsefield, which is a site that's protected by the
With respect, Mr. Speaker, that question came purely from myself. It has no connection to anyone else. Thank you.
Can I move? Can I just tell you that is a question you're putting and has no place there?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Right?
Yes, sir.
Right. We now move on to motions. Notice of motions. Councillor Richard Overton will propose the motion as detailed on your agenda, and the motion will be seconded by Councillor Julie Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to start by paying tribute to the men and women who serve in our police service. They always remind us every day of the dangers that our police face to keep us safe. In our communities in Telford, the cuts to policing are making an impact. Less visible officers on the beat means that people's fear of crime is increasing. It is clear that from the stats in our motion that crime is increasing too. What is most striking about those stats is that the problems facing the police are so clearly a result of having too few officers and staff to meet too high a demand. There is not only an economic but a human cost to the enormous rise in crime that we've seen as a result of the cuts in police funding. Small businesses are facing huge costs thanks to the cuts in police numbers. Many shoplifting offences are not prosecuted, and often police officers do not attend at all. The same applies to residential burglaries and many other crimes. Offenders are going scot-free because the police simply do not have the resources to attend these incidents. Since the Tories came to power, we have lost 21,000 police officers, 18,000 police staff and 6,800 police community support officers across the country. But I fear that rather than facing up to this crisis, the government are determined to try to spin their way out of it. Here in West Mercia, we've lost over 400 police officers. Neighbourhood policing is the bedrock of our policing system, and it has been the greatest loss following the police cuts in the last 8 years. I shall say more about that shortly. Between 2010 and 2015, cuts in policing amounted to 2.3 billion. At least in those days, the government used to admit that they were making cuts. Between 2015 and 17, funding for local forces fell by a further 400 million in real terms. In the year ahead, central government funding will fall by more than 100 million in real terms. It's an insult to the public and to the police that the government refused to admit these cuts. The government will know in the year ahead any increase in funds for local forces will only come through a hike in council tax paid by local residents. And those residents will be angry at being asked to pay more and get less, thanks to cuts that the Tories have made from Westminster. What is more, that method of funding the police is fundamentally unfair. And the one thing to make residents even more angry is that the increase in council tax by the Police and Crime Commissioner here in West Mercia will see no new police officers on Telford and Wrekin streets. The government are forcing local ratepayers to pay more for a lesser service because they are making real-term cuts in police funding. As I have said, funding the police through council tax is fundamentally unfair. The Chief Constable of the West Midlands Police issued a warning about the aggressive use of council tax to raise funds because the police forces that have already been forced to make the most cuts will raise the smallest amount of money. But PCCs can only play the hand that they are being dealt by Westminster. We need this Tory government to fund our police properly. As I said earlier, neighbourhood policing is the absolute bedrock of the model of policing in this country. It is almost wholly responsible for building and maintaining relationships with communities, and it is the eyes and ears of our local police. We need sustained and large-scale recruitment of police officers across the country, and especially here in Telford and Wrekin. The task has become even more urgent as the proportion of officers assigned to local policing, including CSOs, has fallen by 20%. Little wonder then that crime is soaring. Although I do accept the police recording has improved, it is clear nothing can detract from the horrendous rises in crimes. Violence against a person increased by 216% and possessions of a weapon offences by 146%. People know that the challenges facing the police are many and multifaceted, but they also know there are simply too few officers to meet too high a demand, and that means that community safety is put at risk. The government have failed in the most fundamental duty of any government to keep their citizens safe and free from harm. Their ideological cuts have left the public exposed to rising crime, but we all know this should not be the case as crime becomes ever more sophisticated and across county lines. This Tory government is not standing up for the people in the fight against crime by their underfunding, and are clearly not doing their best to address the causes of crime too. This motion is about recognising that locally we need more funding to our police and that funding is done centrally. It also recognises that we as local politicians want to do all we can to keep our residents safe. It is clear that we do think that our residents should not be picking up the burden of paying more and getting less. They deserve better. I move the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Julie Reynolds to second the motion.
I'd like to second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Any other councillor who wishes to speak? You have 3 minutes. Andrew Eade. Done well.
Thank you, Speaker. Well, I think it speaks volumes that you're a council administration facing re-election, and the best you can come up with is a round-robin motion supplied by the Labour Party nationally. I mean, you really are tired and must be short of ideas, really. I would personally like to congratulate John Campion for the work he has done with the West Mercia Police Force since first being elected to post. He's got to grips with all of the issues very well and done it very quickly. From local police officers, who I know personally, Mr. Campion is very highly regarded. When John started in post, there were a total of 1,988 officers in West Mercia. By next year, that will have increased to 2,145, the highest level seen since 2012. This success has been due to increased efficiency, increased income, more effective use of reserves, and next year's additional funding of £2.3 million from the Conservative government. All has resulted in 100 officers having been confirmed in September 2018, of which 40 were allocated to Shropshire and Telford. On top of this, out of a further 115 officers confirmed in February 2019, around 35 will be allocated to Shropshire. Now, let me explain in simple terms how that will affect Telford and Wrekin policing. The borough has been pretty well protected from staffing reductions over recent years. As a result, well, you might learn something. As a result, Telford officers have been required to support other parts of the force, particularly in Shropshire. With Shropshire officers now being reinstated, Telford and Wrekin will be able to retain more of their officers in Telford, and availability locally will actually increase. Now, let me deal with local confidence in our police force. 87% of people have confidence in the local police. It is the highest level in West Mercia. 67% of people locally feel the police are doing a good or excellent job. 91% of people are confident they could easily access the police in an emergency. 73% for non-emergencies. 85% of people feel West Mercia understand the issues affecting their community. The reason why is self-evident, as under Mr. Campion's term of office, in Telford and Wrekin quarterly, total recorded crime is down from 4,008 to 3,840. Average recorded crime rate is also down from 3,825 to 3,761. Crime per 1,000 population is likewise down in Telford and Wrekin from 23.17 to 22.2. The year-to-date figures are just as encouraging. Violence and injury is down 7%. House burglaries are down 23%. Business and community burglaries are down 18%, robbery down 11%, vehicle offences down 24%, shoplifting down 11%. I'm unsure as to why the motion didn't actually congratulate Mr. Campion for his undoubted success. While we disagree with your poorly crafted motion before us, we do support additional funding for our police force, and so we'll support the motion on that basis and that basis alone. Thank you.
Round here. Julie? Nigel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all want to see the police properly funded. However, just like the council, it's important that the available funding is spent wisely. Just a few facts to ponder. Frontline police officers are now issued with smartphones and laptops, enabling them to work on the move, spend less time stuck in police stations. It's worth an extra hour per officer per shift of additional community time. The PCC has invested in body-worn video, rolled out across all the officers, increasing confidence in both officers and communities and providing vital evidence. West Mercia will soon benefit from a new state-of-the-art operations communication centre costing £23.5 million, at the same time ensuring a modern fit-for-purpose police estate by investing in buildings, including a £1.3 million refurbishment of the police station at Mallinsgate. Funding is being provided to deliver transition to civil parking enforcement in Telford and Wrekin, which was welcomed by the administration. And there are new police shift patterns to ensure resources are more closely aligned with demand, coupled with the new Open for Business initiative to ensure communities can access police officers at their local station without an appointment. There's an additional £200,000 prioritised for independent domestic violence advisors, welcomed, additional investment in independent sexual advice advisors, an additional £145,000 provided to Axis Counselling to support victims in Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin. There is investment in an enhanced victim service aimed at ensuring victims get faster access to the right support. With respect to crime prevention, £245,000 prioritised for CCTV in Telford and Wrekin, £152,000 to Telford and Wrekin Community Safety Partnership, with an additional £30,000 for CSE education, an additional £35,000 provided to Telford and Wrekin Council for CSE support, and the list goes on and on and on. They're also supporting Smart Water as well, funding 25% of the cost for any councillors here. So, Mr. Speaker, this is an abject lesson in how to use available funding effectively, not wasting precious resources on vanity projects in an attempt to get re-elected. Note it is a Conservative PCC that has delivered all this extra investment into policing in the borough. Please ask John Campion if you don't agree with any of those figures.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor Sahota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just one or 2 points. When the government cuts the police budget, and not only do we have a less policemen on the beat and a rise in the crime, but such as robberies and the knife crimes, but he also puts under pressure. He puts under pressure our own council budget as well, and in turn the service we provide to the community, because some of the services are indirectly sort of linked. And take, for example, the neighbourhood dispute. At one time, police used to get in, take care of them, and now, due to their cuts, people look to the council to provide that kind of a service where the dispute can be settled. So more pressure on the council budget and the council services. Take another one. Antisocial behaviour is another example. This used to be years ago something that the police used to take care of it. And now they get in touch with the local councillors, because they often come to me and they say, oh, listen, you know, there's something going on around the street. What can the council do? Again, that's a pressure on the council budget and also on our services. Safeguarding children. Because of the lack of policing out there in the streets and the homes, more children end up in the council care. A pressure again. Vulnerable adults who are exploited by the criminals out there end up seeking help of our services. And I was thinking about the trading standard. You know, the trading standards always under huge pressure, and they try to sort of help the people out. Recently, my wife has sort of sought their help as well. So, and a taxi driver, maybe I got too many friends in it driving taxis, but they're always complaining that why isn't council doing something about it? They are listening. So my point being, Mr. Speaker, is because of all these budget cuts police budget cuts by the Tory government, our local communities are always at risk, and it affects our council budget as well. I'll support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Gilly, do you want to support now?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's really interesting, really, to hear the leader of the Tories say that he agrees that the government are putting our community at risk. That's the words in the motion. And yet you deny that there are less bobbies on the beat. You can't have it both ways. The narrative peddled by the leader of the Conservatives tonight really does not resonate with what is said at my residents' meetings, and I'm sure at many residents' meetings across Telford and Wrekin. I suggest that the opposition start talking to real people in Telford and Wrekin and listen to what they say. And I've heard it all. Such a poor argument tonight, and Telford and Wrekin residents aren't going to be fooled by the Tories' dodgy maths. I'm pretty sure my 8-year-olds in my class could do a better job. It's really totally unacceptable for Campion and the Tories to argue that this is somehow a good deal for our borough. We've been shortchanged for years by this government, exactly at a time when we've seen the highest rise in recorded crime in a decade, and the deepest cuts to frontline policing. Is 463 fewer police officers on the beat a good thing? No. Is 56 fewer PCSOs on the beat a good thing? No. Should residents pay higher taxes for less police on Telford streets? Absolutely not. The Tories need to acknowledge the criminal legacy of their government, what that has achieved for our town, and stop welcoming such a flaccid announcement from their Police and Crime Commissioner. So I've got a hunch that cuts to frontline policing in Telford and Wrekin is part of a bigger Tory plan. And this isn't the first time we've been the second best to the leafy, more affluent shires of West Mercia. First, it was Tory plans in 2013 to merge our councils, stripping us of our identity, our ability to attract record numbers of businesses and industry, and forcing us to send our local taxpayers' money to Shah Hall in Shrewsbury. Not on Labour's watch. Secondly, we heard only a few months ago about Tory plans to merge Shropshire's health services, and the fight continues to save our 24-hour A&E and Women's and Children's Unit, another part of our identity being stripped away from our beautiful borough. Not on Labour's watch. And finally, the Tory Police and Crime Commissioner's unapologetic power grab to control the future of not only policing, but also the fire services in our town. As an administration, we said no to the merging of more services, which we know would put people at risk in our town. Not on Labour's watch. The Tories' argument is always about selling Telford to the highest bidder, downgrading services and shirking responsibility to their mates in Shropshire. Absolutely not on Labour's watch. Our positive vision for the borough is putting residents first, getting on with the job of protecting Telford and Wrekin. We've seen the very best of Labour in our town and parish councils, where we've protected PCSOs, putting bobbies back on the beat in our high streets and in our estates. Look, this isn't just about numbers and stats. It's about confidence in Telford and Wrekin. It's about the confidence residents have when working, travelling and spending time with their families in our beautiful borough. And whilst the Tories are cooking the books and shirking responsibility, we'll just get on with the job of protecting, caring and investing in Telford and Wrekin.
Councillor Richard Overton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Isn't it wonderful in Tory land? It's like a children's programme. No cuts to the council, no cuts to the police. It is clear, Council, that our police forces have been stretched. It is a fundamental concern of our residents that visual policing is now nearly non-existent. The people of our borough deserve better. The people of our borough deserve to feel protected and know that crime doesn't pay. Currently, our policemen and women are doing all they can to keep us safe, but as with all cuts, this has a price. Less policemen and women, less resources, and them having to do more with less. It is not good enough for the borough like ours to have less police on our streets. Austerity is not working and has not stopped as promised. This government has damaged public services. Councils who look after the most vulnerable adults and children across the UK cut. The police who make us feel safe and take those who do criminal activities off our streets cut. Our NHS doing all they can to keep us well and keep us alive cut. Cuts don't work. Cuts to public services don't help. They in fact make the problem worse. We need well-resourced public services. The world is changing, crime is changing, and of course challenging. Our residents and our businesses community deserve better. It's time for us tonight to condemn these cuts. We should not be asking our residents to pay more and get less. Council taxpayers deserve more from our Tory Police and Crime Commissioner. Telford needs more police on our streets. This government is failing our borough. This government is making our residents feel unsafe and the fear of crime is rising. That is unacceptable. We need more police officers. We need investment in our police service. County lines, criminal gangs, cybercrime. I could go on. Too much going on and too little to stop it. The police are stretched and stressed. And please, let's not see Tory deniers in this chamber defend cuts. Let's not see Tory councillors tonight defend less police on our streets. Our residents deserve better. Theresa May, give us the police we need, give us the funding we need, keep Telford and Wrekin safe, keep our residents safe. This Labour administration in its budget tonight does all it can to stand up for our residents. We want them to be safe. We want us to be safe. We've had enough of these cuts. Our residents have had enough of these cuts. Enough is enough. I move the motion.
Right, members, we now move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion as put forward?
It's unanimous.
It's unanimous. I will just call, just in case I missed anyone. Are there anyone against? No. And there are no abstentions? No. Oh, yes. Yes. Clive explained his position to me at the start of the meeting, and I agreed that, yes, he should show an abstention. Now, members, we now move on to the final motion. And Councillor Bill Tomlinson will propose the motion, and Councillor Peter Scott will second it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been a long evening, as I'm sure all members will agree. But this is the first ever motion I've put forward, and it's because it's such an emotive one for me. We've had an emergency general meeting to discuss Future Fit, and as people who are far more knowledgeable than me about the NHS know that Future Fit has come out in part, if nothing else, in trying to save money for the NHS and the government. And they're strapped for cash, and we can see it every day with the queues and everything in hospitals. We've just had this motion put forward, which everyone has unanimously agreed on with the police. We know we've got fewer police. It wasn't that long ago we were looking at statistics where crime in this borough for virtually every single category was falling. People could begin to feel more confident again on the streets. We're seeing it in the news all the time about the issues going on about knife crime, and it's getting out of control. The Chief Constable saying we're in a state of emergency in Birmingham, but he's got nothing really much he can do about it. We haven't reached those levels in Telford and Wrekin, as far as I'm aware, yet. But, and this is the but, and this is where the council comes in as well. We've had cuts. We've had our revenue support grants cut, and I've had to decide where we're going to have services, where we're not going to have services, make efficiency savings, look at alternative ways of generating income. It's incorrect of the Conservative group to say these cuts haven't been made. They haven't all been cuts. They've been income generation as well, but that's only to the credit of this local authority. But there comes a point when all these three aspects, police, health and the local authority, can only do so much. And after that, as the police have shown, they've had to reduce numbers. And what's happened? That's increased crime. If we had to make the cuts that the government is still suggesting are in the pipeline, and we don't know what's going to happen in 2 years' time, we could be looking at another £30-odd million worth of savings to have to make. And okay, as a Conservative group would say, it's no use whinging and moaning about it, you have to get on with it. But getting on with it could be cutting those various services which the most vulnerable in our society look to us to protect. The scale of what's still to be cut is still virtually equivalent to what we're currently spending on children's social services. And it just beggars belief we can't cut that, but every year we have to spend more, we're not cutting it. And as Councillor Reid quite rightly agreed, he would look to make children's social services spend more, and on adult. But there ain't much else left to cut after that. If you can't cut that, you're stuck. Council tax increases. We've already said that we're having to increase council tax on people who can ill afford it. We've got food banks growing. There's a greater need. There's more poverty in our area. This is just when people need the local authority for their support. They're looking to us. They're looking to us to safeguard their futures and protect them, to protect the most elderly, to protect the children. And how are we going to do that? Well, we can't increase tax to make this sort of money. So what can we do? All I can see that we can do is the only way we can stop these cuts coming forward, and it's out of our hands, is simply to go to our MPs and ask them, look, Our local auditor has told us that even though we're one of the most robust councils he's come across, and our investment strategies in trying to promote additional investment into our borough and generate additional income, he thinks are fine. However, he predicts, or rather he informs us, not predicts, he informs us of surveys that have been taken in just over a year or two's time, 1 in 5 of all local authorities will have used up every single penny of their reserves. They will have nothing left. Just like Northamptonshire Council, Conservative Control Council, who thought it was clever not to increase council tax to please their ratepayers for 5 years, suddenly found themselves bust. We're not in that position yet, but other local authorities, possibly a bit further down the road from us, are getting closer to that now. They're getting in crisis. When you get into crisis and you're not too sure what to do, you'll cut anything. You'll cut it in a panic, and it'll be an absolute shambles. This is coming to a point now in health, police, and local authority services. It's coming to a crisis point. I echo the words that Richard Overton just said on the police. Enough is enough. It's got to stop. We have got to show the people out there we're fully supporting them. We can only do that by petitioning our MPs to stop any future cuts to this local authority. I move this motion.
Councillor Peter Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it is nice to see a motion coming from this group. People often think it's just a council that's a Conservative or Labour council. This group can be significant. The massive reductions in government grants to this council is a huge issue for every one of us living in the borough of Telford and Wrekin. Because of these reductions, services are stretched and some services are already being devolved down to local parishes. And as it affects all of us, it is only right and proper that we all call on the government and our elected MPs to help us. It is in their hands, and only they can make the choices that will help us. Now, I hope that all members can put aside all this us and them argument, the arguments of politics, and back this motion, because to oppose it or abstain on this motion is not supporting the very people we all claim to represent. Once more, we've got a chance to show everybody here and outside that we can work together for their benefits. So please put aside your political arguments and support it. I second the motion.
Thank you. Steve Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the sake of expediency, can we move to the vote?
No.
No?
No. I've got 3 other people who have indicated that they wish to speak.
All right, okay. Then can we move to the vote?
If I so desire.
Right.
Thank you. Another wasted speech. Councillor Sean Davies.
Mr. Speaker, I'll keep my comments short. I'd like to welcome this motion by the Liberal Democrat and Independent group, and our group fully support it. Local authorities are at breaking point, Mr. Speaker, as are a number of other public services. Over the last 8 years, this Labour administration has done all it can to invest, protect and care for the residents of Telford and Wrekin and for the members of staff that work for us. But unfortunately, we've all had 1 or even 2 hands tied behind our back as this government has continued to cut our funding. And what's frustrating is that we know that members of Parliament who cast a vote in a minority Conservative government have a huge amount of power to exercise. And we've seen, haven't we, Shropshire MPs, unfortunately not Lucy Allen or Mark Pritchard, but other Shropshire MPs, threatening their government that they will not vote for a budget if it includes cuts to local authorities in their area. We've seen, haven't we, in the south of England, Conservative MPs in Surrey saying that they will bring a government down if their council does not receive fair funding. And surprise, surprise, Mr. Speaker, when members of Parliament do that, then they get the funding that their local area has asked for. What frustrates me, Mr. Speaker, is we have 2 members of Parliament who blindly support a government day in, day out, without any regard to the consequences of their actions in this borough and this town. We are 70% rural. We don't receive a rural services grant. We've got some of the highest levels of disadvantage from right across the West Midlands, yet this Conservative government are consulting on removing deprivation as a weighting factor in funding, making Telford and Wrekin worse off in the long run. Mr. Speaker, it's all very well for the members opposite to stick their hands up on police motions and grinning as they do it, knowing full well that they don't agree with the sentiment. I do hope, however, that on this motion they'll vote for it and actually get off their backsides, get their MPs to do their job. They're about to get a pay rise, Mr. Speaker. It's about time they worked hard for this borough.
Nigel?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I iterated during the budget debate, the reduction in government funding is not what anyone wants, but is necessary due to the legacy of the previous Labour government. So at times like this, it is essential that the money available is spent wisely. Therefore, it makes no sense to spend non-ring-fenced council tax rises on celebration events, then tell the elderly or the vulnerable that they cannot have a home help due to government cuts. Mr. Speaker, while many of the projects funded by the Telford 50 Fund may be admirable and very welcome, it is an indulgence that we cannot afford at this current time. The brochures, the parties, the community grants is just a thinly disguised attempt to buy support for this tired administration. But before I leave the subject, can I put the myth of Telford 50 to bed? The Queen came 15 years ago to celebrate Telford 40. We are now told that Telford 50 is to celebrate the naming of the town. Well, please bear it in mind that a 55-year-old that changes their name is still 55 years of age. Mr. Speaker.
Will you concentrate on
Yeah,
the motion,
everyone.
not on the historics? Because I
Yeah.
was there at the time, you weren't.
Yeah. Everyone on all sides of the political spectrum is sick of austerity. However, it's the world we currently live in. Yes, government finances are recovering, but this takes time to feed through to where the money is actually spent. Local MPs from all parties will lobby to get more funding for their constituencies. And therefore, it's in all our interests to support them in the work they do. Something that many members here have difficulty doing in supporting our MPs. When our MPs lobby for Telford and the Wrekin, they need to know that the local authority is supporting them in their efforts, and all members would do well to remember that.
Thank you, Nigel. Goldip.
Just a short point, Mr. Speaker. Bill mentioned, I hope he's enough. Bill mentioned the food banks a minute ago. Just to tell you how far our MPs are removed from, from the people. I was debating with him June 17 in one of the hotel, and the parliamentary election, and Mark Pritchard said that there is no need for a food banks in our Telford and Wrekin area because the people come to it, it's a free food. And then they go home and fill their large American-type fridges, and because it's all food. And I said to him, Mark, you got to grow up and sort of listen to what people are saying. And I'm glad that you're really testing my love for these MPs, aren't you now, Bill? I support your motion.
Thank you, Goldip. Liz Clare. You may sit if you can sit.
Thanks. Sorry to make that fuss.
That's all right.
We shouldn't need this. If an MP gets elected for a specific area, when we have a general election, it's incumbent on them to look after the whole of the electorate. Not the blue, not the red, not the yellow, not the black, not whatever. The day you get elected, then you look after that area. And there's no need for this. If they knew what their responsibilities were, they would be doing this anyway. I find it appalling when, you call one of the MPs the missing MP. You can make up your mind which one it is. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Clare. Hey?
Bill's got right of reply.
Yes. Bill, your right of reply.
I'll keep it brief. I wanted to be as less political as I could because simply the only way we can stop any further cuts to this authority and protect the local people is if the revenue support grant, or whatever they want to call it in the future, is kept at least at the level it is, wherever the funding formulas they come up with. So I earnestly ask this council to support this motion, give our MPs our opinion that we wish for them never to vote again for any further cuts to this local authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Members, now is the time for the vote. All those in favour?
Well, we waited so long for Bill to do a motion, and we thought the very least we could do.
Thank you, Andrew.
It's unanimous, I think.
It's unanimous. All right. Thank you, members. That, members, completes your agenda for tonight, and I thank you for attending, and I thank you for your contribution, and declare the meeting closed.
Adrian Meredith speak or something.
Members, before you go, please sit down.